Welcome back to Heads Up SA. Julius Malema has once again taken center stage in South African politics, this time after being found guilty by the East London Magistrates Court. But what's making headlines is not just the conviction, it's Malema's explosive response outside the courtroom.
Racism, pure racism that we have been subjected to for 7 years, mediocrity of the highest order.
Speaking to his followers outside court, Malema didn't hold back. He accused the presiding judge of being racist, saying this conviction was nothing more than an agenda pushed by AfriForum, an agenda to find him guilty of anything at all.
By releasing accused number 2, the whole case should have collapsed. But the racist was looking for me, and that's why they could not collapse the case for racist reason, to appease the AfriForum, to appease the Oval Office of Donald Trump, to appease all the white supremacists of South Africa who want to undermine the dignity and the struggle of black people. So fighters, we should not be discouraged. We should continue to fight, because this fight will not end today. Divide this organization. The country is rotten. The country is looking for an alternative, and you are the alternative. Amandla!
He told supporters that as a revolutionary, going to prison is a badge of honor, before thanking those who traveled from different provinces to stand with him. But the story doesn't end there. Sentencing has been set for 23 January 2026. If Malema receives a sentence longer than 12 months, he could be barred from holding public office, a decision that would shake South Africa's political landscape. Malema has vowed to fight this judgment. He announced his plans to appeal to the Supreme Court, insisting this is far from over.
Are going to the appeal, and will go to the Supreme Court, will end up at the Constitutional Court. We are not fighting the case, are fighting racism, pure racism that we have been subjected to for 7 years, mediocrity of the highest order.
For the EFF and its supporters, the next chapter could prove even more decisive than today's ruling. Is this the beginning of Malema's biggest political battle yet? We will keep you updated as sentencing day approaches. This is Heads Up SA, bringing you the stories that shape our nation. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.
Certainly the magistrate was at pains to go through all of the evidence that was led during the trial. She recapped the evidence over a period of 2.5 days. And I think she did this in order to, confirm that she had evaluated all of the evidence led, and for possible appeal to follow, to show that all factors had been taken into account. Mm-hmm. I think when one looks at her judgment, she found Julius Malema to not be a credible witness. She found him to have evaded perfectly straightforward questions. For instance, he was asked how many times did he fire off the firearm, and who fired it off if it wasn't him, and his answer was it must have been by the hand of God that the firearm went off, which is really not a good answer strategically if his aim was to come across as being a credible witness before court. Mm-hmm. She also found that the ballistics expert who had evaluated the firearm and looked at the video evidence was credible, and that his findings were to be believed, and that he withstood cross-examination in this regard. Mm-hmm. That is the only objective of a presiding officer, is to evaluate the evidence presented, to determine whether the evidence was credible, and to determine whether the witness withstood cross-examination, and then to make an objective ruling based on that. So I think if one has regard to all of the factors that she mentioned in her judgment, that it was the right judgment that was made. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately for Julius, his evidence was not credible, and it was accordingly rejected by the court.
Then to the impact that such a judgment could have on Malema's continued participation in Parliament. He's yet, of course, to be sentenced, but as per the Constitution, we know that a sentence of more than 12 months without the option of a fine precludes one from taking up a seat in Parliament. So what would be the minimum sentence that such a charge would carry?
Well, this offence that he has been convicted of, so the reckless handling of a firearm, the discharging a firearm, and because it is a semi-automatic firearm, means that it falls within the ambit of the Minimum Sentences Act, which prescribes that if a person is convicted of such an offence, they could face a minimum sentence of 15 years imprisonment. And he should, if he is able to show substantial and compelling circumstances during his sentencing, then that could force the court to deviate from this minimum sentence which is applicable. So the starting point in terms of sentencing for him in this matter is 15 years imprisonment.
Sure, so they're already
and most certainly, yes, most certainly he is looking at a period of imprisonment of more than 12 months. And if indeed that is the case, then that would preclude him from being a member of parliament, as you correctly pointed out. Now, in order to determine what a reasonable sentence would be, the magistrate is going to have to take a number of factors into consideration. Firstly, it is the seriousness of the offence. So in other words, were people's lives placed in danger as a result of Julius Malema's unlawful handling and discharging of that firearm? What was the purpose of him firing off this firearm? What were the surrounding circumstances? Then secondly, his personal circumstances will be taken into account. So in other words, has he previously been accused or convicted of similar offences? Has he previously been implicated in violent firearm-related offences and behaviour? What are his personal circumstances in terms of his dependence on him? What are his contributions towards society, etc.? That will all be placed on record. And then thirdly, the interests of society need to be taken into account. When sentencing Julius Malema, the court must ensure that it is a just and a reasonable sentence, but it also that it carries the necessary deterring weight in order to prevent people from committing similar offences going forward. So in other words, what message is sent by the sentence to society?
Now, Ulrich, we've heard him.
These three factors.
Yeah, you can continue.
These three factors are then taken together and considered, and are blended with a measure of mercy in order to determine what is a reasonable and a just sentence. So certainly, some strategic decisions that need to be made by Julius Malema and his legal team. The factor of whether he clearly shows remorse for his actions will also be taken into account. And him making statements that he made immediately after having been convicted to his supporters will certainly not count in his favor. He says that he was convicted purely as a result of a racist magistrate. But it is that same magistrate who still needs to sentence him. So certainly, he needs to make some decisions going forward
but would
on whether he will be able to.
Pardon me for interjecting there, but would utterances outside of the court space really matter in this instance, or it can be taken by the NPA to say this is an individual who has not shown remorse, but gone on to label this as a racist incident?
Most definitely. So during sentencing, Julius Malema will be presenting evidence in mitigation of sentence. So in other words, trying to convince the court to hand him a lesser sentence, whereas the state will be adducing evidence in aggravation of sentence. And this speech that he made to his supporters will most definitely be placed on record by the state to show that this person, immediately after being convicted, goes out and proclaims that the magistrate clearly made an error, that she's purely racist, and that he should not have been convicted. Now, that is, in my view, not a person who shows remorse whatsoever. And he will have to be careful going forward of any statements that he makes in the public domain prior to sentencing.
Now, speaking of going forward, he's indicated in that address to his supporters that he'll actually be appealing this specific judgment. What are the prospects of success, specifically in the Supreme Court of Appeal?
Well, so after sentencing is handed down, he will then be able to file and for leave to appeal. He can either appeal only the conviction or only the sentence, or both. If he only feels that the sentence was too harsh, he could decide just to appeal that in an attempt to avoid incarceration as a sentence. But it's difficult to tell now, what the prospects of success of an appeal would be. One would first have to